I'm Allison Van. I'm the executive director at Spark. And one of my real areas of interest is in how we can better translate research to decision makers and communities that can be able to utilize it in their work to help build a brighter world. And one of the real tools for that is through data visualization. So to start any conversation about data visualization, I always go to one place, and that's here. Does anyone know what this is?
Oh.
Can you see this now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone recognize it?
I don't remember what they're called, but like the chords that like the knots mean words, or like the distance or counts or something.
Yes. So this is Incan. It's called a kipu. And they were able to encode huge amounts of data within these beautiful knotwork pieces. And so administrative data was all stored within Kipu. So censuses, taxes were all accounted in here, but then also stories. And so when we think about data visualization today, we talk about quantitative and qualitative data. And this was a tool that was used as far back as 1400 CE to be able to capture data in a meaningful way with a visual. And I always like to start talking about data visualization here, because often data visualization gets really caught up in these ideas about all of the technologies and all of the kind of fancy and technical pieces of how do you build a good visual, when the heart of it is that the meaning of a visual is the ability for people to take it in their particular context and understand the meaning. And I think this is just a beautiful example of how creative and the many different kinds of ways that that can actually manifest. So that's data visualization. And then of course we come to the second part of the question, which is in Excel. And there's a very particular reason why when I teach about data visualization, I start people in Excel. We're actually, this is a preview of a course that I'm going to be teaching in the fall as part of the new Masters in Public Policy in Digital Society. And many of the students there will have had some experience with some of these other tools indicated here that offer different kinds of data visualization. There's quite a range here. You have something like Qualtrics, which is really a survey software, but they have now built a huge amount of data visualization into it. You have Shiny, which is part of the R statistical package, and that allows you to do a lot of visualization. Then you have these really powerful dashboard programs like Tableau, Power BI, Plotly, the same. And then much sort of simpler tools like Piktochart. There's a lot out there. And the thing about Excel is that a lot of these things have been built to make it as simple as humanly possible for you to produce what look like really impressive graphics. And so that's what I want to spend some time on, is to sort of talk about what does it mean to be able to produce a really impressive looking graphic. So this is something developed in Plotly that has gotten a fair bit of attention as a really cool looking data visual. So I want to know, what do you think of it? Let me start. Do you know what it means?
A relationship between GDP and life expectancy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's working on a couple of different, it's got GDP and life expectancy. it's got over time.
Mhm.
And then the coloring is countries, and each individual dot is a country within, I'm sorry, continents within the continent. Could you say anything meaningful about the relationship between GDP and life expectancy based on this?
I think it's the growth in GDP. The more the GDP is, the more the life expectancy in a country, and that's where the graph is going. I mean, that's where the visuals are going.
Yeah, so it should say that. I'm not actually sure that it does say that.
Okay.
Because if you were to show that, you should see GDP on an expanding scale related to life expectancy. Instead, you have these bubble sizes. And it took me forever to actually figure out what the bubble sizes meant. Turns out it's population size.
Okay.
So I would argue that you can't actually see the relationship between GDP and life expectancy here. You can see the range of life expectancy, but because the GDP scale is so broad, it looks like they're all pretty much centered on one. So in my mind, and this is the point that I'm hoping to kind of convey throughout this, if it's hard to understand exactly what it's saying, and if there are a lot of different elements, it can be confusing to people. And when it's confusing, people tend to tune out. And so one of the fundamentals of data visualization is the ability of people to understand it within about 5 seconds, which is not an easy standard, as you'll see as I get into some of mine. This is another one from Nike. Thoughts about this?
Too much green.
Yeah, can you actually tell which color is associated with which group?
No, I feel like I can't. I mean, I could distinguish between like the lightest and the darkest colors of green, but I find that like I can't get one piece of information, like for the 44% white at the top, like I have to look at that color and then also look at where there's one block of color that looks like approximately 44% of the circle. Like I can't get just one piece of information.
Yeah, I can't distinguish between the green which shows 5% and the green which shows 44%. It's similar to me. Like I don't see a difference in the color coding.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to really work for this. All right, this next one is one of my favorites. This was actually a big deal graphic. It was on the Nightly News with Brian Williams. Can anyone spot what is wrong with it? All right, I'll tell you. Let's take a look at Asians. So they're up here in this tiny corner in the Pacific Northwest in 1960. And then from like 1965 on, they disappear. And they won't show up again in American population until 2060. And of course, other people didn't exist at all and will only appear in America in 2060, thanks to Maine. So what was meant to be a really cool visualization to be able to show the shift in the ethnic makeup of the country has ended up completely dismissing the existence of ethnic groups in the country. It's a pretty big fail for a graph that they spent a lot of time developing. So what makes a visual bad? This is Stephanie Evergreen. She is in private practice working very closely with individual researchers and evaluators, and then companies to be able to do better data visualization. And she is the author of the textbook that we're going to be using within the Masters in Public Policy course. And so I want to kind of walk through a number of the tools that she provides to make data visualization really easy. This is the book. And to start, I want to just play a quick clip of her talking about the key idea within good data visualization. All right, can everyone see my YouTube?
Yes.
All right.
So, what's your point? Seriously, that's the most important question to ask when creating a data visualization. And it's the first thing I ask clients who send me data for redesign. What's your point? The answers drive nearly everything about visualizing that data. Here's how that conversation often goes. Client, thanks for working with us, Stephanie. We have this data from parents and students, and right now it's in this bar graph, and we are certain it could be displayed better. We just aren't sure how. Me, I can help with that, client. What's your point? Excuse me? What's the point of showing this data about parent and student perspectives? Right now, it looks like you want to compare parents and students. Is that your point? Actually, no, and that's the most clarifying question you could have asked. Our point is that generally we expect students to report higher than parents do on all of these questions, but students have way lower expectations to go to college than their parents have of them, and that set off some alarm bells for us. And this is when I silently pumped my fist in the air because a client answered the most important question, and now I know how to better display this data. Me, after catching my breath from all that fist pumping. The first thing we're going to do then is take what you just said and make it the headline of the graph. We're going to replace the generic title with your main point. The next thing we'll do is swap out a different graph type, maybe something like a slope graph, since those are pretty good at highlighting when one thing is decreasing a lot and the rest are going up. Give me a day to play with some ideas and let's talk tomorrow. The next day, me. Good morning, client. What did you think of the slope graph I sent you? Client. It really does say exactly what we originally thought we needed to show, but I talked to my colleagues more after our call yesterday and I asked them, what's the point? And we decided that the real bottom line point was that so few students have expectations to go to college. Forget the parents, that's a secondary issue right now. What's the point really helped us hone our thinking. Me. Well, in that case, you have some other options for showing your point, and I telepathically send them some new visual possibilities. Maybe one of these. Client. These are all right to the point. We will choose one today. So asking the most important question sharpens the thinking and the messaging surrounding the data. And in doing so, it reveals the best way to visualize that data. And that is everything I want to teach you in my new book, Effective Data Visualization.
All right. So I like to share that because she kind of humorously gets at the heart of the challenge and the opportunity with data visualization, which is to be very clear about your point. And this is actually the thing that when I work with individuals in consultations for Spark around their data visualization, that I spend the most time on is really getting as clear as possible about what their point is, giving them different options and saying, is this it? No, okay, then let's try something else. Is this it? And it's really through the process of honing down and getting really specific about the visual that you get really clear about exactly what you're trying to say. So this is one of the tools that Stephanie has developed that make it really easy to be able to immediately engage with building better graphs. And so I realize this is pretty small, but I'm happy to send you links to the actual documents, which are also small. They're really meant to be large infographics. Or there's another version that I'll show you in a second. The idea is that you start with what is it you're trying to visualize. So she's got a couple options here, like when a single number is important. Here are 4 options for how you can visualize that. When how one thing changes, another changes. This is a way to visualize that. How things changed over time. How we are better or not than a benchmark. So the idea is there are actually a fairly limited number of defined ways that you can display any particular kind of information. And so being able to have the tools to be able to know first, what is it you're trying to say? And then select the appropriate graph is a good 75% of the game. This is really a huge part of what gets you to better graphs. So another way that chart chooser can be used, and I love these. I have actually a couple decks at home. This is the same idea. It's what kind of information are you looking for? And then little cards with each of the different kinds of data visuals that you can use for that particular kind of information. And so when I'm in an in-person classroom, I'll have these available for students to grab, and they can use it as a little reminder as they're working on a particular kind of graph of all of the information that they need about how to do that. So how do we build better data visualizations in Excel? Well, the answer is templates. And again, Stephanie is very industrious. She has available free on her website a large number of templates for how to build better visuals in Excel. And the entire trick of this is that you can do any kind of graph virtually within Excel, and you can make them look incredibly chic. The hitch is that you can't use the default settings. The reason that Excel graphs have such a bad reputation is that their default settings have been so overused. But it is actually a pretty easy, doable thing to customize how you are designing your graphs within Excel. And these templates, which again are free at this website, will walk you through for each of the different kinds of she doesn't include all of them, but she includes a fair number here. And then of course, if you buy her course, you get more. It gives you quite a few different options and specific details about how to build out your visualization. So I'm aware of the time. I want to go into some of the slides that I've developed in Excel over the years. And as I put these together, I cringed at some of them. But it's a good example of being able to show something in preferably the simplest way possible, which isn't always easy. You know, sometimes you have very complex data. So for instance, this data is actually based on 120 odd question survey that's meant to look at every aspect of a youth's identity and be able to measure long-term employment success related to each of those. And we wanted to be able to give each of the youth a little infographic that told them kind of where they were at the baseline of this program. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how you take 150 questions worth of detailed information and make them into something pretty simple that's going to be understandable at a glance. This one is also some fairly complex data. This looks at publications that were coming out of a research institute that I was working at. I would do this one differently today, but I think the point is still true that what we did because it wasn't terribly obvious how we were going to show this information, because it was pretty nuanced, was to just stick in exactly what we wanted people to know. So average publications are here, 17% of our publications are below, and 31% of our publications are in the top 10 percentile. And all of these 83% are above average. In other words, we write really good papers. You know, if it wasn't this was actually in a journal article that I wrote. If it wasn't in a journal article, I would have headed it, "We write really good papers." Here's another one. This is basically showing that in training that was provided, everyone learned something. So on the horizontal axis, this is each person who participated. And then this is, and again, I would have labeled it and thinking back, this is a Likert scale about what they knew before they started the program and then after. And the reason this one works is because we intentionally ordered each of the respondents by the difference between their before and after, so that this looks like a nice visual as opposed to a bunch of crazy lines. That is one of the most helpful things you can do when you've got really complex data, is to see if by organizing it and how you structure the data, you can make it simpler. And here's another thing that I didn't know I could do in Excel until I did it. It's basically a flow chart for this organization that I was working with was trying to build a large eco-village. And they had all of these different committees that were doing all of these different kinds of work, and no one had ever thought about how they work together, or if there was delay in one thing, what that was going to mean for everything else. And so I built this to make the point that there are lots of pieces from lots of teams, and they should pay attention to what each other are doing. They did get that point. Those were all things that I did in Excel, but it's not the answer for everything. There is data that you cannot do a good visualization in Excel for. So for instance, this is, it's using social networking, but it's actually also publication data. And so we were looking at the center that I was evaluating, the extent to which they were doing research across the different domains of medicine. And so we color coded each of the domains of medicine, and then whether each of the domains were off on their own and there wasn't a lot of partnership between them, or if what the center was trying to do, which was to get people to translate between the different domains and begin to work together and talk to each other. And so we were able to say, yes, the center is working in each of the 4 domains. Yes, there is interaction effects between them. They're not off in their own corners. And this basic science domain, you could put some more effort in there. It's a little weak. We were able to tell a great deal just with a relatively simple visual. I mean, it's not a simple visual, but it's simple in that the coloring and the story are able to be seen clearly from what we're showing. So the point that I want to make, and the reason why I began all of my teaching of data visualization in Excel, is that if you know how to do simple, you can complicate wisely. You are better able to make the decisions about when it is appropriate to do a more complex graph and when it just adds confusion. And to be able to embrace the power that a lot of very simple visuals have. Nothing in this chart is in any way fancy as a visual, but together it tells a really compelling story about this particular unit and how they are doing on building out their business. And because this was relatively simple to build, this was built in PictoChart. is able to use a particular template and then just reproduce it again and again to do monthly reports for several years. So at Spark, we are happy to help with any of your data visualization needs. We have 4 hours of no cost consultation with anyone who is doing research. And we also provide at cost training for research teams that are interested in doing more knowledge mobilization and want help with data visualization, data storytelling, dashboards, any of that. And as you can tell, I get very excited about turning complex data into compelling and clear stories for people. All right, I'm amazed we didn't get kicked out. Any questions or comments? Maybe could someone talk a little bit about your experience with trying to build graphs and what you find?
I had a question, like, can we have a session on how to do the pivot charts and all of that?
How to do which kind of charts?
The pivot table and all of that when we are analyzing our own data?
Sure. I mean, the easiest way is to just come in and we can work through how to do a pivot table.
Okay. Okay.
Come in being virtual, of course. Anything else? Jay, do you want to talk? I know you do a lot of work with data storytelling and the kind of the work of bringing it all together.
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to talk. Yeah, with some of the consulting and some support that we do in the Sherman Center as well, we deal with the same kinds of questions, and a lot of times it's, you know, people come in and it's that video is perfect. It just encapsulates it. People come in and they have these big ideas like, I want to make this chart, and they think they know what chart they want to make, and they really don't know what they're trying to do with it. They just know that there's a cool chart that they can create. And so I mean, everything that you said, you know, mirrors our experience as well. It's all about thinking about what are you actually trying to say. And then with the digital storytelling part, it's, you know, using those visuals in service of some kind of a story. And often you may interlace that with some interactive web elements as well. But it's funny. It always comes back to, you know, start simple and then add complexity on top of that. And I think sometimes for early users, it's, you know, they feel that if they're just putting something simple, it sometimes can, I think they think that it conveys that they don't know a whole lot about what they're doing, where it's actually the inverse of that. And I think that's the really interesting part. And I see it with students in my class as well, when we make line graphs, for example, and you try to get them, okay, this is great. Now take 8 elements out and maybe put 2 back in, kind of a thing. So I think that, like, yeah, I find it fascinating. It's how it always comes back to what is your story? What is your point that you're trying to tell? And then go back to your graph and do that about 8 times in a circle, and then you get to the good graph figure.
And the hard part about it is that, you know, the software all have they have a defined interest in making it seem that this stuff should be complex. And, you know, you go search great data visualizations and you get a lot of things that I can't understand what they're about. You know, they are beautiful pictures, but they don't actually convey data. And so, you know, that's why I always start with the Kipu, is because fundamentally it is about being able to communicate data effectively. And if you have a visualization that someone can't look at and know exactly what you're trying to say, then you don't yet have a great data visual.
Oops. If we've got a second, I'll do a plug to, you know, something that you and I have worked together, Allison, on it, is with the Relevant Research Series. And so I've linked to a page there for the latest workshop in that series. And this is Roberta Rocca, who's a data journalist, talking about the experience of data journalism and data journalists working through the early COVID time and trying to gather all that data, but then thinking about how to present it. And they essentially went through the same process. They made these really complex charts that looked really cool, but were so dense that they were impenetrable by 95% of the audience. And so they went back to basics and stripped pieces away. And then just, one message, one graph kind of thing. So if that's of interest to anyone.
Yeah, so definitely check it out. He built this fabulous program that you actually run through, and then on Wednesday, he's joining us over Zoom to be able to talk with people who've run through the program and share what you've learned and what you've produced. Thursday. Thank you, Jay. So there are, as you can see, between Sherman Center and Spark, a lot of people on campus that get really excited about the power of communicating data and would love to help you and support you in bringing that into your set of research skills, because the power that it will have over the long term is really immeasurable.